The Book of Jasher, one of the sacred books of the Bible, long lost or undiscovered, now offered in photographic reproduction of the version by Alcuin, by Jacob Ilive, 1705 to 1763, Alcuin, 735 to 804. Publication date 1981. And there is a note underneath the book which reads, with reproduction of T.P of 1829 edition, the Book of Jasher with testimonies and notes, critical and historical, explanatory of the text, to which is prefixed various readings and a preliminary dissertation, proving the authenticity of the work. Translated into English from the Hebrew by Flaccus, Albinus, Alcuinus of Britain, abbot of Canterbury, who went on a pilgrimage into the Holy Land and Persia, where he discovered this volume in the city of Gazna, printed for the editor by P. Rose, 1829. Originally printed by Jacob Ilive in 1751, fictitiously purporting to be a translation of Alcuin of the Lost Book of Jasher. We found this in public access, so no copyright infringement was intended, and we bring it to all via this video review of the book for educational purposes alone. Preliminary explanation. The Book of Jasher is one of the long lost and long sought for sacred books, which should have been included among the other books of the Bible, but which was omitted or left out, as were many other books. In addition, the two references to the Book of Jasher that will be found in the other books of the Bible, they are historical references to this lost manuscript, and it is only natural that in recent centuries a great many stories should have been invented purporting to tell how and why the Book of Jasher became lost, hidden or suppressed, in order that some of the mystery regarding the Book of Jasher might be removed, and furthermore for the benefits of those students of the Bible who sincerely desire to read another record of the events that are presented in the Old Testament. The authors, the publishers, have thought it well to reproduce the Book of Jasher in its original English translation as given to the world by the man who claims to have found it and preserved it. In order that their reproduction of this rare translation should be without error or change, they have photographed each page by a lithograph process. This gives us a truly photographic reproduction of each page of the translation of the original book. Well, this is given the publishers that. The pages, as they appear in this book, have not been reduced in size or altered in any manner, and only the cover of the book, the first title page, and this explanation are original with these publishers. Attention is called to the many unique phrases found in the early chapters of the book of Genesis in regard to the creation of the universe and of man and woman. It should be kept in mind that the original author of the Book of Jasher was born during the lifetime of Moses and lived in association and companionship with him. Therefore, the first part of the Book of Jasher was written by Jasher from the records and traditions that had been preserved by his ancestors. The latter part of the book is based upon what he observed himself during his lifetime. Consequently, the publishers have in the Book of Jasher a new witness, or we have in the Book of Jasher a new witness to many interesting events and a new presentation of ancient records with a more careful translation and interpretation of the matters which were held sacred by his ancestors. The original introduction and explanatory matter which precedes the text of the book should be carefully read in order that the importance of the book and its translation may be appreciated. The publishers, September 1934. The Book of Jasher, Testimonies and Notes, critical and historical explanatory of the text, to which is prefixed various readings and a preliminary dissertation, proving the authenticity of the work. translated into English from the Hebrew by Flaccus, Albinus, Alcuinus of Britain, abbot of Canterbury, who went a pilgrimage into the Holy Land of Persia, where he discovered this volume in the city of Casna. It has some quotes from Joshua and 2 Samuel. Is not this written in the book of Jasher? Joshua 10:13. Behold, it is written in the book of Jasher, 2 Samuel 1:18. Bristol, printed for the editor by Philip Rose, etc., and by all other booksellers that sold in London and so forth. And this year, apparently, Internet Stationers Hall. Advertisement or advertisement. The following translation of the Book of Jasher was discovered by a gentleman in a journey through the north of England in 1721. It lay by him for several years until in 1750 there was a rumour of a new translation of the Bible, when he laid it before a noble earl. On perusal, he highly approved of it as a work of great sincerity, plainness and truth. His lordship's opinion was that it should have been placed in the Bible before the Book of Joshua. He further adds, by a writing on the outside of the manuscript, it should seem that this translation was laid before our first reformers, because it says, I have read the Book of Jasher twice over, and I much approve of it as a piece of great antiquity and curiosity. But I cannot assert that it should be made a part of the canon of Scripture. Signed, Wycliffe. Since 1751, the manuscript has been preserved with great care by a gentleman who lived to a very advanced age and died some time since. On the event of his death, a friend to whom he had presented it gave it to the present editor, who, conceiving that so valuable a piece of antiquity should not be lost to men of literature and biblical students, has committed it to the press, not doubting but that the attention of the learned will be attracted to so singular a volume. The editor cannot assert anything from, or could not assert anything from his own knowledge beyond Alcuin's account, but that carries with it such an air of probability and truth that he does not doubt its authenticity. Some account of this volume may be found in Alcuin's works, published in one volume, filed in the year 1600 in Paris. He died in 804. Should any gentleman possess a transcript or copy of it, the editor would have liked to be greatly obliged by any communication made to him through the medium of the printer at that particular time in that particular area. Preliminary dissertation of the antiquity and authenticity of the Book of Jasher. When a work of this nature is brought before the public, it is highly expedient to adduce evidence of its authenticity. You got to prove that it's true. It's not something forged in the Middle Ages or medieval times, which must resolve itself into external and historical, and then the eternal proofs of its originality. As to the former of these, it is evident that such a book existed in the days of Joshua, and that it also continued to be referred to in the time of the royal psalmist David. It appears to have been preserved by the judges, first and afterwards by the king of Judah, until the period of the Babylonish captivity, after which event it is not referred to, either by the prophets or by the chronologists of the Jewish nation, a full proof that it was not brought back to Judea. It must then, of course, have been possessed by the kings of Persia, in which country it was found by Alcuin, who was the honour of our own country, and the great ornament of the court of Charlemagne. This great prince, it appears, engaged his attendants on his person, and received instruction in the sciences from him. He also was present with him at the Council of Frankfort, and as a reward of his distinguished merit, endowed him with 3 rich abbeys. So that must be abbot related. When he left his court and returned to England, he was further promoted to be abbot of Canterbury. Alcuin founded the University of Paris in 800. The account of his pilgrimage to the Holy Land and to Persia is given by himself. His object in remaining at Gazna for 3 years was his obtaining this single piece of antiquity, which cost him in wedges of gold at least £500. So what would that be today? Probably about pretty close to $1,500, maybe just under. Not too sure on that one. Which at this distance of time would have amounted to 4 times that sum. Okay, so you can add about £2,000 or more, or just under that, or just over that. He describes the roll on which it was written in large Hebrew characters of the earliest form as being 2 feet 9 inches wide and 9 feet in length, and according to his relation, preserved in the original ark of gopher wood, adorned with mosaic work, though in a state of decay from the injuries of time. Nothing can be produced to invalidate this authentic statement, and consequently it merits the publisher's credence. It could not be brought forward by him to answer any end of the secular nature, as it appears he never made it public beyond the circle of his friends. And when grown old, he left it with his other manuscripts to a friend, a priest in Yorkshire, England. Its preservation from one hand to another for so many centuries is easily accounted for, both from its intrinsic merit and its extraordinary character. Its having been known to our first reformers is evident from the testimony of that illustrious leader Wycliffe. Its falling afterwards into neglect might have been caused from the very few learned men who lived in the following dark ages of popish ignorance, when little was known, even by the priesthood, beyond their missals, litanies, and breviaries. The manner of its being brought to light about a century since was quite accidental, but then being laid before a distinguished nobleman who appears to have been high in office on the most important occasion, that of a new translation of the sacred scriptures, when he delivered his judgment of it as a work of great sincerity, plainness, and truth, and whose opinion of it was that the Book of Jasher ought to have been printed in the Bible before the Book of Joshua. From that time it appears to have been preserved only for its antiquity and curiosity, till it fell into the present editor's possession, who, on perusing it, saw sufficient reason for its publication, especially as it supplies a chasm in the history of the judges from the death of Joshua, including the elders who outlived him and judged Israel. These are Caleb, who judged Israel 12 years, Jashar, who succeeded him, and Othniel, who saved Israel from Chushan Rishathaim. And then the events are recorded in regular succession of the succeeding judges. One of the most remarkable circumstances is that the book is not more frequently referred to, but this publisher could account for on this principle, that it was not regarded as an inspired work as the books of Moses were. It makes no claim of that nature. Jashar declaring that he received his information from Caleb, his father, and Hezron, his grandfather, and from Azubah, his mother. This applies to the events which occurred before his own times. He afterwards records facts as they arose, and states them with the simplicity and force of truth. They agree in general with the statements in the books of Moses, and where they differ, it appears that he relates one series of facts which are not narrated by Moses, although likely to have occurred at the same time. But it is remarkable that Jashar does not ascribe the causes which gave birth to the events narrated by him, nor does he introduce his commands with the authority of a lawgiver, or proclaim them as Moses did, with "Thus saith the Lord." As a book of record, it appears to have truth without mixture of error for its peculiar objects and design. His name, Jashar, or the upright, seems to stamp all the words and actions, and his counsels and laws are dictated by love to his countrymen, zeal for the honour of God, and a regard to the welfare of his people and nations and their posterity, for whom he prays with ardour and affection to the time of his death. The author states here, he then came to the internal evidence which verifies the authenticity of this work and proved it the very genuine production of Jashar. He begins with the creation of the world, and in a manner similar to Moses relates the first production of this system. There is a perfect accordance in his account of the formation of light, which he says shone forth from the firmament and enlightened the abyss, because remember, the earth is supposed to be empty and void and in the darkness, and covered by water. There's no life on it at this particular unfathomable period. So it was divided between the light and the darkness, so that the face of nature was formed a second time. Then he proceeds to relate the formation of the sun and moon, which he says appeared in the firmament, the one to rule the light and the other to rule the darkness. His account of the creation of man is truly sublime and determines a point of the highest importance, the immortality of the soul. The question has long been agitated as to the sense in which the image of God in which man was made consisted. Here is a testimony of infinite value in the solution of this point, and worthy of being recorded in every language under the face of the heavens. It answers all the learned arguments of Dr. Warburton in his divine legation of Moses, proving the great doctrine of the immortality of the soul and a future state of rewards and punishments to have been the undoubted judgment of the first patriarchs. The grandeur of this passage exceeds all the strains of human description. And when all these things were fulfilled, behold, Jehovah appeared in Eden and created man and made him to be an image of his own eternity. This passage proves that the first ages were fully convinced that man is formed for eternity, capable of immortality, and ordained for a never-ending existence, and consequently an heir, or a chief, the head of everlasting happiness or misery, or possessor of probably. This doctrine established all the offices of religion, morality, and humanity flow from it. Man must be an accountable being, and ordained by his glorious Creator to live forever. It is to be observed that the fall of man, the promise of the woman's seed, or descendants, and the early predictions of a deliverer are not mentioned by Jashar, nor does he at all allude to any of the predictions in the books of Moses, excepting those of his song, in which the future fates of the tribe are predicted. Shall we determine this to have arisen from his knowledge, that these subjects were designed to be revealed by the Hebrew lawgiver, or Moses, or from his ignorance of them? It appears to the publisher, with this particular person, that his book is simply a work of record and not of revelation or prediction, and that the divine mysteries were appointed to be made known by one greater than Jashar, his master and teacher. The words of Alcuin, which are to be read before the Book of Jasher. As a footnote indicated there, Alcuin lived in the 8th century. See biography of Alcuinus, Flaccus. Alcuin of Britain, was minded to travel into the Holy Land and into the province of Persia in search of holy things and to see the wonders of these. And it took him 2 companies who learned with him under able teachers and masters all those languages which the people of the East speak, namely Thomas of Malmesbury and John of Huntington. And though we went as pilgrims, yet we took with us silver and gold and riches. And when we came unto Bristol, we went into a ship bound for Rome, where we tarried 6 months and learned, or they worked for 6 months, and learned more perfectly the old Persic language, or Farsi, the old Persian language. Here the Pope blessed them, okay, and he said, "Be of resolution, for the work you have undertaken is of the Lord." From Rome they went to Naples and worked there, tarried there 3 days, and from there to Salerno, and from there to Palermo. They went through Sicily and took Melita in their way, where they abode 6 days, where they stayed there for 6 days. And then they sailed from the Morea, visited Athens, Thessalonica, Constantinople, Philadelphia, Pergamus, Smyrna, Ephesus, Antioch, Colossus, Cappadocia, Alexandria, Damascus, Samaria, Bethel, and Jerusalem. And there they stayed 6 weeks, and the patriarch John received them kindly. And after having visited every part of the Holy Land, particularly Bethlehem, Hebron, Mount Sinai, and the like, they crossed an arm of the Persic Gulf at Basra, and went in a boat to Baghdad, and from there by land to Adil, and so to Caspian. There they learnt from an ascetic that at the furthermost part of Persia, in the city of Gazna, was a manuscript written in Hebrew of the Book of Jasher. He stimulated them to this undertaking by observing that the Book of Jasher was twice mentioned in the Holy Bible and twice appealed to as a book of testimony, and that it was extant before the writings which are now styled the books of Moses. They immediately undertook the journey, going by the way of Ispahan, where they worked 3 weeks. At length they arrived at Gazna. There they laid aside the pilgrim's dress and hired a house, where they dwelt during He stayed in the city, or that city, which was about 3 years. The publisher, or this particular person, Alcuin, soon became acquainted with the keeper of the library, which belongs to the community of the city, and inquired of him concerning the Book of Jasher, which the recluse Casman had told them of. He said he had read of such a manuscript in the catalogue of the library, but had never seen it, though he had been custos for 45 years, so that means like custodian. But that it was locked up in a chest and kept among the pieces of antiquities in a separate part of the library. As the Alcuin, this person Alcuin, it's talking about this particular guy, this supposed custodian. As he lived near the custos, he soon became familiar in his family, where for one day he took the opportunity to tell the custos that he was very much obliged to him for the civilities he had shown him, and particularly for the free access he had given him to the library. Okay, so this is Alcuin probably talking about that particular guy. At the same time, he made him a present of a wedge of gold of value of £50, which he readily accepted. Yeah, so he's talking about this custodian of it, of this library. The next time he went to the library, he begged a favour he might see the Book of Jasher. He then immediately turned to the catalogue, where it was written, the volume of Jasher. He conducted him into a long room where he showed him the chest it was in. He then informed him that the key was in the hands of the city treasurer, and that upon proper application he might see the volume. The custos, or custodian, introduced him to the treasurer and related to him the substance of his request. He smiled and said he was not then at leisure, but he would consider of it. So he wasn't obliged to probably to open it up for him. The next morning, Alcuin sent John of Huntington to the treasurer with a wedge of gold of the value of £100 by way of a present. By John, he sent him word that he would meet him at the library under the 9th hour. So gold obviously talks. Okay. Or that value of it. And gold bar opened this guy up. The time being come, the treasurer, the custos, the custodian, and Alcuin met at the library. When the treasurer, having unlocked the chest, showed him the book, which he called the volume of Jasher, and then he locked the chest and gave Alcuin the key to the custos, telling him that it was permitted that he might read in the volume as often as he would in the presence of the custodian and in the library. Or the custos. The Book of Jasher is a great scroll in width, 2 feet 3 inches, and in length about 9 feet. It is written in large characters and exceeding beautiful. The paper on it which is written is for thickness the 1/8 of an inch. To the touch it seemed as soft as velvet, and to the eye as white as snow. The ark is of mosaic work, finely and curiously wrought, but time and accidents have very much defaced the external ornaments of it. After this, he had free access to the Book of Jasher. The first thing which commanded his attention was a little scroll entitled The Story of the Volume of Jasher. This informed him that Jasher was born in Goshen, in the land of Egypt, that he was the son of the mighty Caleb, who was general of the Hebrews, while Moses was with Jethro in Midian, that on the embassy to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, Jasher was appointed verger to Moses and Aaron, to bear the rod before them.